Namaste and in catch. Hi, I'm Zen Benefiel, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. As I've said many times before, Namaste comes from the Sanskrit that's spoken, it's Brahmi, and in catch comes from the Mayan. Namaste means the divine in me, recognizes the divine in you, and in catch means I am another you. So imagine if we can just kind of internalize those meanings and begin to learn how to live those, how our lives might change and how the world around us might as well. So thanks for that. This week's guest is Brady Mick, and Brady and I have been chatting for a while, and he's got a great background. We actually have some connecting dots at Ball State University, a little different time frame, but we both attended there, and we had similar kinds of experiences. I'll bring him on here, and then I'll share a little bit about what mine was, and see if he'll express what his was too. So before I do that, though, Brady was a director of strategic design for SHP leading design. So he's known as a thought leader of thought leaders in the design industry and the ability to create and design systems. Now, he also says that, and I read this from his LinkedIn, or no, it was actually a blog that he says, I'm designing my future. In this new reality, I imagine that status quo is a creative challenge. Divergent and new ideas are welcome. Work progress is for people to produce results in a positive experience. Purposeful design requires deep thinking. And boy, we're going to get into that. Teams are built on a strengths-based philosophy. Innovation is valued as equal to collaboration. Learning is currency, and the future has meaning and purpose. Brady, thanks for joining us.
Wow, thanks for having me, Zen. What a nice introduction. Did I say all that recently? Yes. But I have left SHP, by the way. They were very good to me. Very, very good company. But I am out thinking about many things I'm anxious to talk to you. Let's see where we go, Zen.
Good. And we're going to have a very interesting apocalyptic chat as we've already found out in this uncovering of what we know and what we experience and the new ways of thinking and being. Now, back to Ball State for just a moment. Wonderful place for both of us, at least temporarily anyway. For me, I had some challenges there. I hit my knees and prayed to know what truth was and was willing to die for it. I was living in Swinford Hall, which I lived on the 4th floor. I think you lived in the 2nd floor.
I did.
But afterwards, I had this, a week later, an experience where I was asked if I was willing to die for what I believed in. And after contemplating a couple of things, Christ consciousness being one of them, still felt a little empty, so I didn't go with it. Cosmic consciousness was my second thought. I went with that, and wow, I learned, I left my body, went into the light, went beyond, and came back in this really wonderful experience. And the thing I brought back was understanding that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form. We just don't recognize it yet. So with that, Brady, you had a really interesting experience yourself where you kind of came to an awareness.
Enjoy my cats. Yeah, I think my memory is I was an architecture student. I was in the architecture program, and I am an architect. I went all the way, and but I kind of skipped a lot of studios because afternoon isn't my best time to think. But I spent a lot of time in Bracken Library.
Yeah.
And there literally was a point in second year when I went up onto this floor and was looking for a dark corner to hide in for a while. And there on a shelf was the entire collection of Carl Jung. And pulled down a book because the Police album Synchronicity.
Yeah.
1983, 84 was one of my favorite albums. Still is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I didn't make the connection. Didn't know Jung at the time. Was starting to make the connection of why that album meant so much to me. But literally, so the book that I pulled down, I just started reading, and it was talking about synchronicity, his concept. And I think he was toying around with the collective unconscious at that time as well. But anyway, and it was kind of a brain smack,
Sure.
feeling. something is supposed to be here, but I have no idea what just happened. So I kind of had a decision to make. The next
Well, it dislodged you from what you thought to be true.
It very much did, or I sensed something else, and the words chosen there made complete sense. Not intellectual sense, but made purpose. They had value, tremendous value. So I connected with that, but I think where I'm curious to go with you here is that you get to those moments in life where you connect with something and it shakes you sideways, just to knocks you back, spins you a little bit,
right?
And then you kind of turn around and you face reality again, and facing grades and people that you care about, and how far was I willing to go at that point into, well, what I later understood. I've read Jung for my entire life now, what he did, that deep dive and the risk and ostracized from his profession, and I honestly wasn't willing to do that. So I sort of skated around on these topics that, quite frankly, you are not afraid of at all, my friend. So these things that you're taking on is extra.
Well, kind of like you, that when you have those types of experiences, you cannot deny them. And to do it is fruitless to not acknowledge it. And it's kind of like getting smacked in the head multiple times with a cosmic 2x4, right? And if you don't pay attention to it, your life becomes chaotic, and it drives you back into that place where you begin to start questioning and looking and experiencing and sensing and looking for sense, right? This whole idea now of sense making, we've gone to the point now where we've intellectualized everything, and most of us live from the head up, but we forget that looking back in those ancient, indigenous cultures, like I mentioned earlier,
yes,
there's a 3 brain system: the gut, the head, or the heart, and the head. And the first introduction, and even now there's medical proof or scientific proof that the solar plexus has a bunch of neurocircuitry in it, as the heart and
there's neurons there,
the brain, right? There's neurons there. So we know from quantum physics that everything's vibration, nothing is solid. So how do we tune into that? That's the gut. That's the impression, the intuition, the impression, the gut feeling. And most of us haven't learned how to really pay attention to that. And those initial sensations, we kind of set them aside because we don't know how to talk about it. And if we do, people think you were nuts, right?
Let me ask you a question, Zen. I saw something happen in my work. I'm going to say it was, let's say 12 years ago, maybe 15, at least 12, it became apparent to me that suddenly across the work world, across the corporate organizational world, this word innovation started popping up everywhere. I'd say by 2012, it was rare that I would go into a customer and a corporation of any size, some of them very big, and the word innovation was not in their tagline, or at least it was in their value proposition. That innovation is what we're all about. So anyway, I think about that word. I'm still focused on it, particularly coming out of this, whatever's happening now, this post-COVID reality. Innovation has to be an intuitive event, I think. Reflect on that with me. Do you think that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I come from the perspective, having been in the realms that I have, I've learned that there's a natural design embedded in everything, including problem solving, right? So you have a challenge that you need to meet. Well, there's a natural flow. There's a sense making that takes place when you ask the right questions toward solutions, right?
Now, there's 2 ways I can think about that with you, maybe both. Maybe there's 3 ways because they're both combined. There's the predestined outcome, or there's the systemic approach to coming to whatever it was that was supposed to come. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Which one? So, how does that intuition work? So, I've never imagined anything that hasn't already existed as a concept that's out.
So you're talking about the right and left hand, right? The 2 paths to the solution. Well, those two hands are attached to two arms, and the two arms are attached to the same body, right? We just don't see the body. We think there's two hands. And so we separate ourselves from that. So in asking the questions, and you know, I was a production control coordinator for an aerospace company years ago, and part of what I had to do is when we had problems in assembly or test or any of those areas, I had to confer with a manufacturing engineer in order to fix the problems. And it could be design, it could be assembly, you know, process, it could be multiple things. So we had to uncover what was there, right, as the problem first, and then the solution would seem to automatically present itself, or at least the questions to find it would. Right.
Ah, oh, it's even better. Yeah.
Right. So because you've got this, you know, we have to make this unit work, right? So why isn't it working? Well, this and this is happening. Okay, so what's causing this? What's causing this? What's causing this? So you ask those questions, and then there's the what ifs, right? Because as those questions, as you figure out what the challenge is and how those multiple aspects of it fit, then the natural course of direction seems to, if you're quiet enough. Now, there's those that, you know, and engineers seem to do this. I know all the answers, right? I know. So what's fun?
Designers do that too.
Oh, well, yeah, architects and archies, right? You guys are all left-brained, right? So now you're learning how to apply the corpus callosum and bring the right brain into it, so that there's this flow of information that spins together and resolves as a solution. Now that's a kind of a large concept to grok, right, using Heinlein's term, but in that process, it just makes sense. So if you step back from it and ask the right questions, then the solutions emerge in order to make the design change, or you know, the manufacturing process, casting or whatever, right? So it's traceable.
I think what I've hoped, Zen, what I've hoped for the last 30 years in this profession of design, it's kind of why I've stepped outside of it for the moment. I think just this summer, I'd like to find a new job. I want to keep working. I got a lot to do. So is that you would use the word quiet. The word quiet is an incredibly important word when you're talking about intuition, because we're taught that our brains speak first, your three-brain system, right? And we're taught that yeah, I think we are, at least, that the heart, the language of the heart is, well, it's very dramatic. It can be very dramatic, be counterproductive. And it's also a lot of fun because we love soap operas, don't we? Human beings in our society, we love them. We love stories. So anyway, I think the quiet is an unfortunate occurrence that we have to embrace now in our world. I don't think the indigenous or the ancients necessarily had to do it as much as we're going to have to do it.
No,
they were
their
more
world was
imbalanced.
much quieter. It didn't have the hustle and bustle that we do.
When I go into customers, and basically I run workshops, I run design thinking workshops with customers as a way to start to uncover future possibility. That's my job, that's my work.
Right.
So that we can create things that don't yet exist that are going to help them become more of who they are. That's what but
so
that's
you're embedded in this process.
To ask them to be quiet. To ask these folks, I mean, I have to create noise. I have to. And those are, you know, those are tools and processes, and it's a lot of fun. And so far, you know, it almost always generates insightful results, almost always, and generates insightful results. And if translated well, better results. But to ask them to be quiet, Zen, not even in our language scape, is it? How do we get there, my friend? How do we do that?
Well, how
we just make a choice, right?
Well, yes, and how I approach that is you ask the question, hey, can we, you know, just be quiet for a moment? Let's experiment for a moment. Let's be quiet, just sit with the question that's before us now, and just sit with it. And just watch what happens, either visually or in your thought process, as you become more quiet and open yourself up to potential answers.
Yes. So I used to, you made me remember something. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to read a story, an idealized future state of being,
Mm-hmm.
that they was enticing these folks to move towards. Did it with a bunch of government agencies. It was really fun to do it with them.
I know that well.
Nothing against them. It wasn't
Huh.
part of their lexicon, But anyway, and then have the blank sheet of paper and the pen, and give them the challenge to draw some lines, not to write words necessarily, but to draw some lines. You may remember that, and how good things used to come from that.
Right.
Remember a time in your life when you were you lost track of time, where you were really in the moment, where you were creating results, where you were really flow, the idea of flow, right?
Except Mihaly.
I can never pronounce his name. Mihaly, yeah. Yeah,
I had to learn that because I repeated enough. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and his book, Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience.
That's got to be more than 20 years old. That's got to be 20 years old now, right?
Right. Well, look at Howard Gardner's work with multiple intelligences, right? Those were never applied or have yet to be fully applied in the educational system, right?
Oh, so good.
You cannot test for them. You have to observe them in the student, right? So you got to be in that quiet place.
I think that's correct. You can ask them experiential questions, but the problem that I always run into is that it's impossible to not ask a personal preference question. And that's not the point. It's not your personal preference. It's, have you had the experience of connecting with your future? Show me what that looked like, so that we can do something. We can, as a team of people, we can create something not necessarily unexpected, but of higher value than just giving you the rote response answer.
Exactly. Now, one of the other hats that I wear is partnering for building road and bridge and waterway construction projects, multi-million-dollar jobs, right?
Right.
And part of the process I take them through is code of ethics, right? So we have a blank board or a blank flip chart, and I said, okay, how are you going to treat each other?
Yeah, what comes up, my friend?
Right. So, well, what's interesting is that they all at least speak the words of building community in some way.
Right.
Right. Of trust, integrity, do what you say you're going to do, follow through, communication, proactive communication, all these kinds of things. So and I'm not telling them, right? They have to come up with these. So when you ask the right questions and you allow your audience to come up with those things, it's a stepping stone to building a really solid framework and team that works together from the get-go, because these are pre-construction workshops before they break ground, usually. Right?
Yes.
And they're done so that you've got a solid team. Well, code of ethics is one, then we got the mission and charter, and then goals and objectives, and all of those kinds of things. And so we talk about how this works and what their experience has been of it when it's worked best.
Yes.
So you've got 20 to 40 people talking about their personal experiences and what's worked best for them, and it's all shared. And so you've got this common resource now, or a relational database.
What I love about that is that change management, all the rage for the last decade and a half at least, still the rage. In my experience in that world of change management, I've been through ProSci, and ProSci was good. It gave you lots of tools, but unfortunately it's a one-way conversation. You tell people about the change, you tell them how they're going to act when they run into conflict, right?
Right.
Thomas Kilmann assessments, one of my favorites. It talks about conflict modes. I've used it with sessions before. We all have different ways of dealing with conflict in our lives and how we resolve it. And if you get somebody who's a competitor, my way is best, compared to somebody who's an avoider, then you're going to have social dynamic breakdown. You're not going to have a code of ethics anymore. Somebody's going to probably get hurt.
Right.
So change management tells people, if we think we must tell people at work and otherwise how to act. What you just described there was a way to bring them to a process of self-realization together.
Exactly.
Did I understand it well enough?
Yes, you did. And that's the whole idea of sense making, right? You no longer, it's not a top down, it's not pyramidal, it's flat line. You all work together in order to create the best solutions possible because you all co-created this. And so the facilitation of that is an art and a science, as you know, right? You've been in it for 25 years or so. And so you've experienced these things on a more regular basis than I have. I understand the theory and I have some application of it because of the hats that I wear, but it's not been a consistent thing. So I've been able to go in, have the experience and then step back and go, okay, what could have been better, right? Or what, in looking back, what did I miss that I could have spun differently and had better results with? So that's the whole idea of self-assessment and growth, right? And you've got to, as a facilitator, you've got to be able to do that or you're going to have problems eventually.
Well, sense making is such an interesting collection of two words, to me it is at least, because as a design professional, I'm making things, lightly speaking, imagining things is a better way to put it, but they have to be sensical. They have to have some, and literally sensical in some cases, because
absolutely,
they're real spaces. They have color, they have texture, they have form, they have light, they have surfaces, they have furniture, they have people. So sense making, though, often fails. And well, let me put it this way. If you Gallup as an organization, they've done this wonderful Q12 tool for many, many years, and I love it. It's so silly, but it's so much fun. They think they can ask 12 questions and determine whether or not you're engaged. I mean, present, productive in your work. And Marcus Buckingham is the dude that wrote about it a lot. They asked the same question year after year after year, and they thought by asking these questions that they would raise the consciousness and engagement levels would go up. Well, what they found was the first few years that only about a third of the workforce would be what we would call engaged in their work. Basically, that means they wouldn't jump ship tomorrow if a better offer came over the table, right?
Sure.
But they really wanted to be there. They wanted to get up and go to their job, and 10% wanted to get up and go to their job. 1 out of 10 people want to get up and go to their work. I think that's optimistic, but that's what they said. So you ask these 12 questions over and over again, year after year, and you think, okay, these are good questions. Do you have a best friend at work is my favorite question, and do you think your boss respects you or appreciates what you bring to work? It's never gone up. Still a third.
Well, it's like Einstein says, you do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. So
absolutely.
There's corporate insanity involved here. And so what do we do to change that? And I think
what do we do?
Well, I do believe that's what's happening now, because there's a refresher course in play, right? Because of COVID, first of all, and I said this to my wife when I first started, I said that, I really hope that this obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration will get people to turn inward and begin to examine themselves and what they're really made of and what they stand for and what they're willing to do, right? So now, and even Schwab asked in his book, COVID-19, A Great Reset, can we be caring and compassionate towards one another coming out of COVID, right? Now, he may have had a different intent with the answer to that question than what's really there. But he also says on a business side, can businesses be agile enough, right? So now we're being faced with, okay, we've had a total shift, not total, but a very large shift in the workforce. And it's gone from office to remote working. So now these remote workers have a chance to live in different places because they're no longer confined to a location. And they're beginning to start looking for places, a building community that has more nature, that has a more co-living and cohesive living environment. And there was a festival that I presented at not too long ago. It was called Rebuild, and it was building regenerative communities.
Okay.
So again, the virtual world helped this happen, right? People from all over the world. I was one of probably 50 different presenters on various aspects. I presented on holistic education. I had a model village that I'd written a business plan for after teaching high school for almost a decade, 20 years ago, right? So it was way ahead of its time then. Now, you know, I use the holistic word at that point because it dealt with the mind, body, and spirit. And now there's the regenerative that also includes the earth.
Yes.
Right. So it's this wonderful transformation that's taking place, and it's arduous. It's in some considerations tragic, right? Because people's lives are affected, and yet there's this transition towards a better way with this process of sense making, because it needs to be done, and there's this needs that's present now that brings questions, right, that maybe weren't being asked before, but now there's this collective that is saying, hey, you know, what are we doing? How are we working better together? And what can we do? And they're asking the audience, which could be employees, right?
Yeah.
How do we build a better company?
Yes, they were asking. Do you feel the same shit? I mean, okay, so we had this event, and the reality was, for whatever reasons, we shut everything down. And for the first 2 months, I wrote about it myself, trying to theorize. And the big fear was the productivity was going to crash, and we had to get back to blah, blah, blah. And it turns out 6 months in, it's funny how it happens in 6 months increments, by the way. The first 6 months, productivity didn't crash. I mean, Satya, CEO of Microsoft, said publicly, productivity's gone up. You know, Microsoft's productivity has gone up, and then that trend kept happening. And then the second 6 months, we sort of, I don't know if we got comfortable with it, but we got used to it. It takes 6 months to change adult human behavior. Belief system. It takes 12 months. So the second 6 months, we sort of got comfortable with this reality. And then we went into the third 6 months, and suddenly the stories changed. Culture was being affected. Company culture. And the leaders were, you know, having shortness of breath over it's going to affect our culture. And people started getting lonely. I'm not sure that's the right word exactly, but disconnected. They craved more human connection. I mean, well-being, mental well-being was the subject of the third 6 months. And now we're sort of in the, you know, we're there again in the next 6 months. And everything, to me, looks like it's pushing back to pre-COVID.
Well, and of course, there's the catchphrase, you know, the new normal. Right. So normal, looking back, we were used to certain things, right? Humans are driven by patterns and processes,
Yes,
right? When you begin shifting those patterns and processes, then there's this, it feels like chaos, right? Which we've gone through and several times. So there's new layers or new patterns and processes with each of these 6 month increments, right? That's getting us to take a look at things and partially from what I can see, and this goes back to a conversation that I mentioned earlier that pre-show with Jose Arguelles and the transition between ages, and that in that transition, there's a rise in awareness and consciousness to a certain point where there's a tipping point. Happens to be the winter solstice of 2012, just for argument's sake, right? So once that tipping point takes place, what do you do with that? Well, you've got a new awareness, you've got more of a consciousness of how connected things are. So you begin to implement that awareness and that consciousness back into your work life and your personal life and your relationships and all of those kinds of things, which also then tends to bring those things that are still discordant to the surface, and sometimes apocalyptically, right? To where now everyone can see, whether they recognize and agree or not is another case, but everyone can see that there's this fallacious narrative going on that's trying to dominate and control people globally. And there's so much buy-in to it temporarily that these new patterns and processes are diminishing the human character instead of empowering it. And so people are getting tired of that. Wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. Right. And so they're now starting to get down into their body and look, because, you know, we live above the shoulders, most of us, and we have no idea what the body's doing. We don't know that it's an instrument, let alone how to tune it and how connected it is to reality, whether it's this world or others, right? Because there are many, quantum physics is even showing that. So what the process is then is that we're learning new patterns of receptivity, of being able to pay attention better, and to use that attention along with intention and interaction to at least be open to or vulnerable to new results that are better than anticipated. And for years I've said, you know, you get happy people in the workplace, they do more with less supervision, and they far exceed what your expectations could ever be, because they're enjoying themselves. Now, possibly this remote working aspect, because they're not in those environments that, you know, because people don't leave companies because they don't like the work. They usually leave them because of the bosses.
Right.
Right. So now they're on their own. They're self-initiating. They can do their jobs. They love to do their jobs. Right. And so they're going to super perform, at least temporarily. Right, which is what that second 6 months was, or the first 6 months where the productivity went up. It's like, oh, wow, okay, I got to do these things, and I've got enough time to focus, and I don't have any distractions in the office. Right?
That's huge.
Yeah. So now
I can have some quiet.
Precisely. And families got to know each other again.
Yeah, also cited it. I'm laughing because it's also cited as one of the reasons to go back to work. Gotta get away from the kids.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of a joke. Attention, intention, interaction. That's a tremendous set of words you just went over there a minute ago.
It took decades to distill it to that point for me.
If we could give our attention to the problems at hand. Maybe I should take a positivistic point of view instead of saying problems, the opportunities at hand.
Very good.
And with our intent, make sense, learn from them, make sense out of them, and then interact in a way that we can oh boy, I'm getting word heavy here, but enable them, make them real. They're not just ideas anymore. And I can make this real because one of the quandaries that this is just me turning it over in my head, Zen, is it seems to me that one of our biggest Achilles heels of learning from any event in work. Nothing against Peter Drucker, nothing against Edwards Deming. They were both brilliant management philosophy kind of guys. But they created a system for us that is full of errors. And it was based on assembly. It was based on mass production. That was the world that they wrote in.
And that's what our educational system is based in too.
Thank you. Howard Gardner. You mentioned Howard Gardner. He reacted against the same thing about 10 years later than those dudes did. Well, actually, Drucker started in the 50s, earlier than that. But anyway, we're still stuck with that paradigm of what is good management. Well, good management, isn't it putting my 8 or 10 people together that are on my org chart and putting them in the same nest and having meetings to direct their behaviors, direct their productivity? And guess what? That's exactly what workplaces still kind of look like.
Right.
They kind of, and now we've played with ideas then of open, agile environments. They were there. Activity settings was all the rage as we came into the pandemic, and but it also wasn't the answer.
Right.
It was trying to put everything into one basket. So I believe in complexity theory. I believe in the idea of creating an ecosystem that has sustainability. And I'm talking about design ecosystem now. I love nature too. I mean,
one of my previous interviews was with Michelle Holliday, who wrote a book, The Art of Thrivability. So it's not just sustainability, it's thrivability, because that's what we're after, right? We want to thrive. We don't just want to be sustained.
Absolutely. That's positive psychology. That is, oh, I wish I had that book with me too.
Don't worry about it. It's in your head.
I'm working my way through it right now. It's pretty good stuff. If you like, we didn't learn from Howard. We also didn't learn everything from Edwards Deming when he taught us the total quality management fiasco of the 1990s. But his ideas are much richer than that. We have so much,
right?
And grab onto.
And then you've got the ISO. So the TQM ISO, right? Yeah, the ISO 9000 series, which are certifiable for aerospace and government work and things like, maybe it across all industry for manufacturing.
All industry. It's in the architecture industry as well. It's part of the materials verification process.
So the interesting thing about the ISO is they also created a document called the ISO 26000 Social Responsibility Standards. It was ratified by 92 countries in 2010.
I don't know this. Teach
exactly. Right? Hardly anybody does, right? But it's a 99-page document about how to build social responsibility within the corporate environment.
Was it good?
Absolutely.
Could be crap too.
Well, it was the start. So there's a document now that, and this, rather than the ISO 9000, which are certifiable and you got to pay money and you get the stamp, right? The ISO 26000 are intentional. Right. So this is a document that the workforce can then rally around and move it up through the system. Right now, and this is the thing about, for instance, I have a coaching client that is director for the marketing group of an organization. And so we've been working on this switch in leadership styles because it needs to take place, right? That he's got good people working for him. Now he has to learn how to work with them and empower them by asking them the same kind of questions we've been talking about, right? To give them, to help them be self-initiating leaders on their own with solutions, because the guys in the trenches know better than the guys upstairs, right? They're there. Right. So where's the best place to go to ask questions as to what needs to change and how does it need to change, or what are the suggestions for the change that might benefit not just that group, but the entire company, right? Because those things, then once you figure out how to do that in a cluster, then that can ripple through the rest of the organization because it's proven itself to work, right? There's evidence, there's statistics, right, that show that, okay, you do this and then you're going to get this. So why not apply that throughout an organization? And that's where we're at now, where the leaders are going, oh my God, how am I going to lead? And you've got this push up, not push back or push down, but you've got this push up from the workforce going, hey, if we don't get this, then we're going out. And that's what's happening right now. And even I saw a video of an HR person that was being interviewed about they work for the oil and gas industry. They were headhunters. And they were saying that major oil and gas companies are saying, hey, we need to replace our vaccinated workforce in the next 3 years.
That's a strange thing to say.
Absolutely. And so, she's sharing this. It's like, okay, these are things that are going on at high level decision making. The general public have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of short-term thinking, unfortunately. That'll have a very short half-life.
But that's the low-level thinking that isn't thinking about the larger system and how to find that natural order or expose it so that it emerges within the system, which is what sense making is all about.
Yes, darling, we all hear you.
She even agreed, right?
she agrees.
Right.
Her name is Sappho. She's my kitty. So I have a story for you that I hope you enjoy. It's an idea more than it's a story with an idea. All right.
Okay.
So I have a son. I have 3 children. My youngest son, he's 17 now, but he's an independent spirit. All right. And so about 6th grade, he decided on his own that school just wasn't doing it for him. So he stopped working. A very intelligent young man. Okay, it's not an issue of intelligence. Very
Not uncommon.
smart, very common. And so trying to be the good dad, I thought of what to do. I'll get to the story fairly quickly here for you. He went into a gaming reality. He immersed into these multiplayer, multinodal gaming systems. Xbox is his box of choice, his portal of choice. So he started playing these games, and it was very hard to change the paradigm of what a good parent is, right? If you don't do your homework, you don't get to play games, right?
Right.
But fortunately, probably some people would disagree with me on this. I have a good friend who does. I made the decision, go play your games. Go for it, man. It's where your passion is. I had done the Strengths Finder, and I've done all the research and used it in sessions with customers. And his strength was to go into this reality. All right, here's what I discovered out of it. 2 years later, it finally hit me. I would spend time in the room, didn't understand most of it, but I would enjoy it. He would talk to me, tell me stories, and his language changed, and all these things started booming. All right, here's what I discovered. This is my connection. What he and his colleagues, multinodal agile teams with small cores of expertise. So he had found friends who were good at certain things, and they liked each other. They could talk on their headsets. So they had a social dynamic that worked. And then others would come and go as the teams needed to build. And he had created this he was immersed in this new work reality. And here's the thing about it. They were agilely flipping between the 3 major roles that you and I were discussing a few minutes ago before we went into this diatribe. Employee, worker, doer, manager, and leader. Mm-hmm. Right? That's how we basically categorize work. Yep. And it's just so short-sighted, but that's what we do. And he was flipping roles in one action. He would flip between a manager. He would say, well, I think we need to all organize here and go in that direction. And then he'd flip out and he'd do his part, and they'd all flip back together. And then somebody would bring up a concept, a big idea. And the whole idea for him of a CEO and a vice president and a director, I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of sense. I don't think it's going to make a lot of sense to those folks. He will have times when he's going to be a young person. We all did, didn't we, Zen? Where we had an idea and we thought it was good and we thought it made sense. But the leaders either didn't want to hear it or we were too afraid to give it to them. Anyway, my point is attention, interaction, and intent. Attention, intent, and interaction. There are 3 words. He's doing it. He's doing it every day in his virtual reality. Take it from me because it means something to me.
Well, I'll build on that. And I think what you did and how you observed it is a critical factor because you notice the benefit and the strengths in it, right? Now, I have a similar situation. I've got 4 kids. I got 2 great grandkids. So I didn't think I'd be raising another kid. Well, we have a 17-year-old now with my new wife, and he's a gamer.
Okay.
He wasn't, he got into a place where he just sequestered himself and he wasn't paying attention to the things that he needed to do. And we were getting letters or emails from the teachers and things. So we did 2 things. And one, we tried several things over the last couple of years with him. What I had him do was, because there's a certain thing, there's an addiction that takes place or can, right?
Yes.
And there's obvious signs of that, which means that usually that other things are being neglected, right?
Yes.
So rather than just take the game, his box away, right? I had him write, if you were a parent and you recognize these things in your child, what would you do? And so he went out and he did a bunch of research. And I asked him, I said, write a paper, right? So he wrote almost a full page, typed it, right? And it was really good at how he went in depth and studied the topic, looked at how he was affected, looked at what was necessary to bring him out of that. And so we had this epiphany, we had an apocalypse, right? In the process.
An uncovering in terms of that word, right? Not a blow up, an uncovering.
No, apocalypse has never been a blow up. The Greek word of which we get it from simply means uncovering or unveiling.
Thank
right?
you.
And so this was an uncovering of the deeper truths that were there, and it gave him the opportunity to work through it on his own. And that's the secret of it.
Brilliant.
You can't tell people what to do. You have to ask them the right questions and engage them and allow them their own process, right? Whether you like it or not, it's their process. Now, the better ways, and this just came, it was one of those epiphanies to say, what about this? And my wife and I were talking about it, and she goes, wow, that's brilliant. And so we tried it, and it worked. Now, he's also now involved in computer science classes, and he's doing things a little bit differently. So he's recognized that what it can do, and he's also adjusting to bring back his ability to play the games again, right? And so now he's going to be playing them with a different MO. And
that's wonderful.
What you just said to me, now I can have yet another conversation with him, recognizing those aspects so that he can too. Because I've witnessed that, the very same thing that you were talking about with your son. And it's amazing. The intelligence, the social capacity or socializing capacity that creates is completely different than what we grew up on. Yeah, the passion. If they didn't have passion for it, they wouldn't be so absorbed.
I know. And I understand that I certainly respect the fine line between passion and what can be addiction. I get that. And I just want to make myself feel better to say I watched for that very carefully.
Sure.
And now I can tell you, I'm just so damn proud of the boy. He's ROTC. He wants to go into the military. He's got a beautiful girlfriend. She's lovely. He's got all A's the last 3 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
And he did that not just because that he wasn't forced to, right? You recognized things in him. You encouraged, you empowered, you acknowledged, you did all the things that did not diminish him. Right?
I appreciate that, but I'm also the dad that, took the 3-year-old and said, you will not leave the table until you eat 1 pea on your plate. He sat there for 4 frickin' hours.
Right.
All right. So I finally said, okay, you win. Just go.
Right. Well,
So anyways, I appreciate that. But no, I mean, yes, if we took a point of view, just to kind of lighten this up for us, if we were able to empower each other at work, through the design process, ourselves,
right?
Is that the paradigm we are really at? Are we in the empowerment age now? Is that kind of where we are? We're no longer drones. We're no longer...
decades, there was this notion or this narrative about the coming age of enlightenment.
We've been through that, haven't we? Well, keep going. I'm interrupted. I'm sorry. Please explain.
No, you're not interrupting, and don't be sorry. Be Brady.
The Enlightenment discourages me. Well, so it has baggage.
So does Apocalypse, right? and so in this, what's it really mean? Well, there's this better wisdom involved. There's wisdom involved in the application of the knowledge that we have.
Okay.
Learning how to apply that knowledge in better ways. And as we learn that, we're also having this bridging of science and spirituality. Living in quantum entanglement is the same thing as living in spirit, right?
Yes.
And so
It's hard not to talk about quantum entanglement without thinking of the spiritual. Yes, hard. The
right.
language isn't there yet to separate them, at least.
No, and this is part of the learning, right? There's a new language, there's a new living experience, there's a new living awareness that's taking place because we're actually paying attention intentionally and interacting. Right? So, and this, it's foreign to most of us because we haven't been taught how to do that, but yet we're at the place now where we're so uncomfortable living like we were that now we have to make those changes to live how we desire and how we know is possible. And even, in these cross-referencing, there's and I've referenced her before, there's a Russian academician, their last name's Minorova, and she does a dissertation on the recent scientific discoveries that prove this elevation in consciousness that's taking place, and she calls it a global mutation, right? And so there's science that backs all of this up now, and the deeper we dive, the more questions we ask, the more intelligence we apply to it, then the greater rewards we get from it in the sense of being able to actualize it in our lives, right?
I hope you're right.
You're doing it. You leapt off the cliff and you said, okay, I'm done with this world. There's something better. I need to make myself available, whether you thought this or not.
I did.
Right?
Forgive me.
So now you stepped off that, and in order for the new to come, you had to let go of the old, right? Now, my dad used to say, it's easier to find a job when you have a job, right?
Actually, it's true. I've lived my whole career that way. So yes,
right.
But I don't think that's true right now, because I hope, my hope and my intent is to help move into the age of intuition.
Right.
It's not the age of empowerment. That doesn't sound right to me. But we've had the Enlightenment. We've had reason. First came reason, then the Enlightenment, and then mass production, and now we're in this science where we lean back on the language of science to make it real enough to be digestible. When we transcend through that, we don't have to say it's science. And we can just say it just is. You and I were talking about that in our pre-meeting, that it just is, and is okay. Then we're going to be in this age of all three brains working together, I think. And the brain that's suffering the most is the one that comes from our gut, that mind, and it is spirit. You just can't not use metaphysical language. We just don't have good language to talk about intuition, Jungian ideas of intuition, without going to the metaphysical.
Absolutely. It used to be termed, New Age and woo-woo and all this kind of stuff, but there's really no other language that applies as good as it does currently. What gentleman that has become a friend, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, he had a show on PBS for a number of years called Thinking Aloud. He was the only doctorate in parapsychology out of UC Berkeley. Took him 3 years to get the program approved. And he's been doing the show for 25 years for PBS, and now he's online with New Thinking Aloud on his YouTube channel. And I did a show back in the early 90s that I wanted to emulate two people, Bill Moyers and Jeffrey Mishlove, hoping someday I'd be able to have an interview I'd be worthy of an interview with one of them. 20 years later, it happened with Jeffrey.
Aww.
And so in these discussions, we were talking about this concept of the New World Order, right? And it's been bandied about with kind of a false narrative along with it. And it's essentially a new facade on the old world order, right? The true New World Order is one that's emergent. It's one that is frequency based. It's metaphysically based, it's gut based, because everything is resonant, and those resonant fields are beginning to come present because we're not tolerating anything that's not resonant anymore.
But it doesn't have to exclude the rational. It
Not
doesn't
at
have to
all. It's
exclude the
inclusive.
emotional, and it
It is
certainly doesn't have to exclude the sensory. They should all be integrated together, correct?
exactly. That's the whole thing about oneness. It's all included. There's no separation of it. It's just different lenses. It's okay. One of the things I use in my workshops, I just hold up a hexagonal pencil, the number 2, right? But each side's painted differently.
Hmm.
So everybody sees it differently. It's the
Yeah.
same pencil,
Yeah.
right? So we have all these different views. We call that circular thinking, right? So now what if we shift that to spherical thinking, right? Now that's a stretch for a lot of people because it creates this almost a mind-numbing effect, right? Because you can't,
Well,
it's like, well, what do we do with that, right? And this is
Jung gave us another gift, though. He gave us another gift to help us break through that, I think, and that is his judger and perceiver notions. And
observer,
well, the judger in the observant mode takes the object of the idea and says good or bad. There's nothing wrong with that.
right?
You can make, yeah, that's really important. The perceiver does this and looks at all the sides of the pencil. And it's pretty clear to me in the Myers-Briggs research of the last 50 years, we all have both. I mean, it's not you're one or the other. We all have, we bring to that comes to the party every day with us. It's just being attentive, intent, and interact in a way that we can ask good questions of it. I can judge things very easily. This is an ugly ball. This is a good ball. Oh, it's got 60 sides to it.
Right.
And each side has a different message on it. And I'm perceiving it differently. Anyway, it's not a ball. It's a diamond, you know?
Take that to another level. And this was first introduced to me by a gentleman named Kai D. Had a doctorate in theology. He was actually Wo-Fat on the original Hawaii Five-0. He was the rector for Taoist Sanctuary here in Tempe. And I'd interviewed him on One World before. He says, you know, in the Taoist philosophy, it's either desirable or undesirable. That's it. And so that's the gut, right? It either feels good or it doesn't feel good. And if there's questions, then you know, if there's like, well, there's part of it there, or not quite, then that's where the why.
I know. But the Taoists gave us no hope because they told us the more you talk about it, the less you understand it.
Well, and that's a misnomer as well, too, because you know, there's paradox in truth.
Well, Lao Tzu,
right?
Lao Tzu just gave up on his society. That's what I've come to believe. He was just done with his emperor, and he went over the wall and said, here, these are my thoughts. See ya.
So now that we're a global community, how do you see this kind of, for lack of a better rhetoric, is that the appropriate use of the word?
I think so. It's word searching.
Right. How do you see that coming into play and maybe helping us evolve into something new?
I don't have a good answer for that, but I have a suspicion, an intuition, if I may.
Okay.
That two avenues to enlighten us, I hope. One is the learnings of positive psychology, the teachings or the research done in positive psychology, abundance thinking. And two, the great work being done in the complexity science realm. And you've used the word of emergence. If we can allow ourselves to become more comfortable with the currently ambiguous and open ourselves to interaction with divergent ideas, it's more likely that innovation and creative output and good engagement and, you know, happy workers maybe can occur.
Just happy people in general. You know, we are uncomfortable with ambiguity, and that's where vulnerability steps in.
Creates fear.
Right? And so there's this, you know, kind of a trifecta of faith, love, and trust that becomes present. And and that's an uncomfortable place to be for most people because they're used to.
Starts to get a little new agey again.
Yeah. But we're used to the the definitive solutions, the being told,
Science, come
right,
down to the one,
right.
isolate the one,
Or
study the
even
hell out of
religion,
it.
or even religion, there's a mediator, right? And there really isn't, right? We've all got a direct connect. Like I said earlier, we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form as a point of light, and that point of light bounces back and forth depending on how well we learn how to use it.
And interacts and has response and has call and has potential.
Exactly. Now, how we roll this out is through conversations just like we're having and on a quantum.
Tell me what we've done.
Well,
we've been over a lot of ground.
From a quantum entanglement level, we've created ripples, right? That now, because the words we've been talking about, words have vibrations, they ripple through the thoughtmosphere, for lack of a better, and they find residence in resonant others. Now, those may not, and I'm jumping off the cliff here with this theory, right? I don't think it's theory. I think it's applicable and practicable and noticeable. When we do these kinds of things, we understand that we are contributing. We're doing things that feel right, and it creates harmony between us because we're in an agreement of how we experience the world and how we desire to experience the world. And it uses those precepts in new ways to give us a better foundation of thrivability, right? And that's the agile side of being human, not just business. And you were talking earlier, that Gardner came out 10 years after Deming and Covey or whoever.
Peter Decker.
Yeah, Decker and Deming. And of course, with the U.S. rejected Deming to begin with, so he went to Japan and showed just what it could do. So
yeah,
right. So these kinds of things, we're still progressing. We're evolving planetary civilization. We don't necessarily see ourselves in that way because we're living in the moment most of the time, and not even realizing that we're living in the moment. And a lot of times we carry the past and future, or the past concerns or past regrets and the future fears. And so they affect our present, and we're looking for those things, so we produce them. Now, just the opposite can occur, right? We can glean, and we can harvest our past, right? So that we can apply it in the present for a better future. And that's what sense making, in my opinion, is a lot about, right?
That's great.
I'm bringing those different things forward, and having conversations like this is a rare opportunity for me and you, because those things haven't reached the critical mass yet.
All right. It doesn't, you won't be able
You
to.
got lots of notes, huh?
The past, our tendency is to regret the past. Regret.
Right.
Our tendency is to fear the future. Our way through, I think, is to focus on the abundance, the positive of the past. Positive psychology teaches us abundance thinking. And to imagine creatively the future is whatever role I've got in this reality, I'm there. That's where I'm going to focus. Creatively imagining a future that does not yet exist so that we can take steps now to get there with abundance. Mm-hmm. And the abundance, imagining an abundance really connects to the idea of sense making, doesn't it?
Yep. And therein is the apocalypse. So we're nearing the end of our time, at least for now, right? So if you going through this process, because you're right in the middle of this, you made the choice to eliminate the distractions of your future by leaving your job, right? So how could you advise others who are facing similar situations and how to get through it?
The first and easiest answer is never alone, right? Never. never alone. That's what I did at Ball State. I did it alone, and it was miserable. So I have a tremendous network. One of our shared friends, Jerry Nylands, being one of them. Tremendous network of people that I can reach out to, and now I consider you hopefully as part of that. And my love of my life is back in my life. Anyways, a network to bounce ideas, to test safely, and to make good decisions. The second thing is I am, how do I put this? My meditation is hard labor, my yard. So I have just been working. It's too hot today. It's 100 degrees outside.
Carry water, right?
It's just, I know it's hot in Arizona, but it's hot and humid here today. So anyway, but my gardens, my brick circle that I'm creating out there, my yard, my house, my books, anything that allows me. YouTube, love it. Searching YouTube for lectures and ideas and things. I'm just trying to fill myself up right now while I've got this time to not be distracted. And I'm also, and the third thing is just the quiet. Seriously. that's the word I'm going to be taking away from our conversation today, thinking about the most, is just simply the quiet, because the quiet can sometimes be the noisiest thing of all if you're not prepared for it. So I think I'm learning, and I would suggest we call it meditation, but it's more than that. It's just presence.
Yep.
So, and again, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Meditation is supposed to be presence. But again, that meditation, like apocalypse and, these like tyrant, like we talked about, these words have multiple errant meanings now. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but I have a network of friends.
Here's what I think I heard you say, right, was that you're not alone. Talk to people, right? Be willing to be vulnerable and talk to people.
And put silly things on LinkedIn, like the list of 10 you read at the beginning. Thank you for reading it. It made me feel good to hear them. Thank you.
Oh, good. And then to engage some kind of work to let your mind relax or let your mind work on its own. And also combine that with some form of meditation where you're quiet and you're allowing.
Yes. Yep. Fill it and then let it just.
Right. Cool.
Is that meditation? I think I just described meditation. I think I did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Just be quiet. And meditation doesn't necessarily mean just sitting quiet and still. You can meditate and walk, chop wood, carry water, right? You meditate while you're doing the yard work because your body's physically involved in something. So your mind's a little freer to have those thoughts come in.
The Zazen position never worked for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay.
And it just, sometimes it happens when I'm playing drums. Sometimes it happens when I'm playing golf. Sometimes it happens in conversation. It depends on your attention, intention, and interaction, and how you're engaging all three.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Those words are now there.
All right. Cool.
Thank you for those.
Oh, well, and thank you, Brady, for the wonderful conversation. I'm sure this is going to be a wonderful thing to share, and our audience will love it as well. It was really fun for me, and I can see it was for you too. So thank you again very much.
I'm very energized. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And namaste and in laquettes. Thank you all for watching this episode of One World in a New World, and we'll see you next time.